Hello, welcome to the latest episode of DavCat 43. Moi presents DavChat, a almost daily broadcast, sometimes twice daily, which includes musical interludes and includes analysis of American political dynamics, mainly that Trump's a fascist and that fascists don't rule to solve problems. Fascists come to power by manipulating optics, manipulating emotions, and then they stay in power by an appeal to legitimacy by pointing to the fervor of the brainwashed. Hey, Alan, nice to see you. So I'm probably going to start by singing a song today because that's my mood. I think the stock market might be taking a dive today. I don't know with that stock market. That stock market is crazed on Trump grift, i.e. people with stimulus checks who aren't using that stimulus check appropriately. They should be saving it. They shouldn't be trying to make a buck. But desperation can make people do foolhardy things. People are rushing in to do things like make the company Kodak increase like 1,000%, more than 1,000% in their stock market price because Trump is agreeing to give them millions of dollars to change from being a camera company to manufacturing pharmaceutical components, which a lot of companies try to get out of. Generic drugs and their generic components are not big sellers, or they don't sell at a large profit. So Kodak doesn't even have to do anything, but the Trump grifty contract is a money spinner for the CEO of Kodak. And of course, all of the dupes who plow money into the stock market buying Kodak shares will eventually lose that money because Kodak is a camera company. But hey, I know I don't have a broad audience of stock market investor type amateur folk who are going to listen to me, so my warnings will fall on deaf ears. But the economy, as I've been saying for some time, was in a recession in February, was in a manufacturing recession in October of last year, 2019. Trump is a terrible economic manager, and he does various things to distract you from this or to paper over the glaringly obviousness of the crashing economy. Republicans cannot get their shit together to save the economy either because they're ideologically distraught over the idea of giving people money who need it, because their whole prosperity doctrine, which is essentially a very embellished rhetorical structure built to support greed and problems with sharing, and a sort of Malthusian devotion to the idea of starving poor people out in order to maintain a kind of serfdom where people are so poor and so politically underserved that they can't have functional unions and can't get good employment conditions and therefore are at the mercy of powerful executives and corporations to be squeezed for profit at will. Well, exactly. Kodak was a camera company. It was struggling, and Trump has promised to give them money to transform into a pharmaceutical ingredients manufacturing company. It's a huge jump. It's not thoroughly plausible, but it'll make the CEO millions upon millions of dollars for just having agreed to that. Your taxpayer dollars, correct. Correct. So when will the stock market crash, like lose 50% of its value? Who's to say? Because the stock market can ignore bad news for a long time, it would appear, when they still have the excitement. And the excitement is palpable in having a grifty president who will distribute taxpayer money to his cronies and to his to the donor class of the Republican Party. So yes, it's your money and it's your company your country that is being pushed into the dirt, and everybody's just counting down the 100 days until you can vote him out. Although he is trying to muddy the waters about the economic news today by giving you something new to stew over today. Putting in a question mark rhetorical statement, we should delay the election, question mark, question mark, question mark. Make this a news story instead of the terrible economic news, because I'm still clinging to those little news stories that say, yes, voters think Biden would manage the health crisis better but Trump is still winning on the economic, winning the public's trust over on the economy. when that's BS and the trajectory of that has been visibly going downwards, but not enough in the media would acknowledge it. That Trump was clinging to a shrinking positive margin of people who trusted him over Biden in relation to economic management, because the economy is not separate from public health. When public health craters, it drags down the economy with it. It's very easy to understand logic, but apparently not for a lot of people reporting in the media that just have these well-worn little grooves to tread. Republicans have credentials as money managers, as economic managers, when history has repeatedly shown that Republicans talk about the economy and respecting businesses and how deregulation is so useful, when the main thing that's useful to businesses is having a viable pool of consumers with disposable income who can spend money, because consumer spending drives at least 70% of economic activity. And when Republicans get so much power that they were able to shaft the working and middle class sufficiently, the economy contracts and consumer spending is reduced. And guess what happens? The economy starts to crater and businesses start to close. And at first it's just the small businesses closing, and the bigger businesses get to buy up those smaller businesses and say, wow, I'm in such a position of strength now from gobbling up smaller businesses and taking over their properties that they used to rent at cheaper value and foreclosing on mortgages. That's great for me. I'm surely in an unassailable position now. Eventually, recessions, if not stopped by judicious expenditure of stimulatory government money, which is public money turned over to the government, eventually that economic downward spiral becomes self-perpetuating into a depression. And yes, Perry Pilots dropped in to say they detest the concept of exceptionalism. Americans are used to clinging to American exceptionalism as a form of cheerleading themselves into a self-fulfilling prophecy situation of greatness. And it's been a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's had the positive function of encouraging and cheering Americans to succeed. I don't know if it's separable or not from what appears to be the downside of it, which is ignoring American problems. But I think we can separate it. I think you could still have American exceptionalism and say, look at these really exceptionally cool things we produce, like Hamilton. Hamilton is so great. But also address the fact that some of the economic ideas that are very diffuse across American society and very diffuse in the hearts of a critical mass of American voters, that you should approach an economy like a family budget. And it's just not true. It's just not effective for everybody to have this dysfunctional belief that government stimulatory measures are bad and that people must pull themselves up by their bootstraps and that government spending programs are bad and encourage dependency. You can still make those arguments, but they're not the only arguments, and they are terrible when they are too powerful and exist without that check, which is people need help sometimes to get into a level of basic assets that allow them to function as humans and allow them to have enough stability of their daily needs to be able to pursue those higher level, higher tier needs, such as education and personal fulfillment. Oh, Herman Cain's just died. I remember he was in a lot of photographs from the Tulsa rally, the unsuccessful Trump failure of a Tulsa rally with 6,000 people in attendance. But Herman Cain was there in the front rows taking pictures of himself and his friends as if to say, Black people represent Black supporters for Trump. Evidence really of the internalized racism that some people feel, that they need to separate themselves from the rest of their demographic and say, no, I stand alone. I can be a Republican if I want, even though they oppose government policies that help my people. help people like me. I can say, hey, the phrase people like me has no meaning because I'm such an individual that I can be a Republican. I can buy the surface Republican logic that Republicans stand for business and diligence and hard work and pretend that Democrats are against that. Yes, there are significant problems with the American healthcare system. Obamacare tried to address that and would have more effectively was there not a significant amount of Republican sabotage and a significant amount of sabotage that some Democratic voters were complicit in effectively by not turning up to midterm elections out of disappointment that Obama wasn't a wave a magic wand, fix everything messiah that they hoped he would be. He didn't have enough support in Congress to be able to put Obamacare in place, the Affordable Care Act, to bring in more than 30 million people. So Obamacare gave access to healthcare to 30 million Americans. Apparently, it's a system that works reasonably well when people have access to it, when you don't have Republicans working to restrict access to that. Thoughts? I feel some sarcasm dripping off that remark. Thoughts and prayers. Pete, did you see that Herman Cain died?
I did see he died of coronavirus.
Yeah. He was at the Tulsa rally. Yeah. Because we've been saying that maybe high-profile people dying of the coronavirus will help drive home the public message of people needing to take the virus seriously, to stop pretending it's a hoax. I mean, you look at Trump supporters, they'll alternatively grasp at various straws and say, yes, it's a problem, but it's China's fault. So that's where we're going to leave our response. We're just going to sit here and say, well, China did it to us. So we're not going to help ourselves. We're not going to reflect on the disparity between American outcomes and outcomes in other nations, because we're just going to sit here and play blame games. Like, I wouldn't even say like children, because it's too rude to children. Children appreciate. Oh, whoops, it's John Lewis's funeral right now. Well, I'm sorry to be disrespectfully broadcasting at the same time then. What should I do? Maybe I should just go. I'll sing one song and then I'll go. There was someone in the US who died of COVID because he had no health care. No, I don't know who he is. Okay. Mr. Ed's happy about the one song. Hang on. It's water. It's water. Okay. All right, this is the Schuyler Sisters. There's nothing rich folk love more than going downtown and slumming it with the poor. They pull up in their carriages and gawk at the students in the common just to watch them talk. But Schuyler, man is loaded. Uh-oh, but little does he know that his daughters, Angelica, Eliza, just watch all the guys at work. Angelica, Eliza, and Peggy, the Schuyler sisters. Angelica, Peggy, Eliza. Daddy said to be home by sundown. Daddy doesn't need to know. Daddy said not to go downtown. Like I said, you're free to go. Look around, the revolution's happening in New York. Angelica, work. Bad enough, Daddy wants to go to war. They're shouting in the square. Bad enough, they'll be fighting on our shore. In the air, look around. Angelica, remind me what we're looking for. I'm looking for a mind at work. I'm looking for a mind at work. I'm looking for a mind at work. There's nothing like summer in the city. Someone in a rush meets someone looking pretty. Excuse me, miss, I know it's not funny, but your perfume smells like your daddy's got money. In the city in your fancy heels. Are you searching for an urchin who can give you ideals? You disgust me. You disgust me. I'm a trust fund, baby. You can trust me. Reading Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Some men say that I'm intense or I'm insane. You want a revolution, I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. Behold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And when I meet Thomas Jefferson, I'ma compel him to include women in the sequel. Look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. Look around, how lucky we are to be alive right now. History is happening in Manhattan. We just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world. Thomas Paine. Someone said that I'm intense or I'm insane. You want a revolution, I want a revelation. So listen to my declaration. Truth to be self-evident. Look around, lucky we are to be alive right now. History is happening. We just happen to be in the greatest city in the world. In the greatest city in the world. Angelica and Liza and Peggy, the Skylar sisters, we're looking for a mind at work. Hey, in the greatest city, in the greatest city, in the world. Yeah. Needs more rehearsal, that one. I'll do some more. Dear Theodosia, what to say to you? You have my eyes, you have your mother's name. When you came into the world, you cried, and it broke my heart. I'm dedicating every day to you. Domestic life was never quite my style. When you smile, you knock me out, I fall apart, and I thought I was so smart. You will come of age with our young nation. We'll bleed and fight for you. We'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you, and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Yeah, you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Ooh, Philip, when you smile, I am undone. My son, look at my son. Pride is not the word I'm looking for. There is so much more inside me now. Ooh, Philip, you outshine the morning sun. My son, when you smile, I fall apart, and I thought I was so smart. My father wasn't around. I swear that I'll be around for you. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make a million mistakes. I'll keep the world safe and sound for you. We'll come of age with our young nation. We'll bleed and fight for you. We'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you, and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Yeah, you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Thank you. You say the price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. You cry your tea which you hurl in the sea when you see me go by. Why so sad? Remember we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our estrangement, I'm your man. You'll be back, soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back, time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. You say our love is straining and you can't go on. You'll be the one complaining when I am gone. And no, don't change the subject, 'cause you're my favorite subject, my sweet, submissive subject, my royal subject, forever and ever. And ever and ever and ever. We'll be back like before. I will fight the fight and win the war. For your love, for your praise. And I'll love you till my dying days. When you're gone, I'll go mad. So don't throw away this thing we have. 'Cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da, da 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 da. Everybody, da 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 da. Da 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 da. That was fun.
All right. That's what I'm talking about. Now,
I can
everyone,
tell that I don't feel like
give it
talking
up
about Trump right
for
now.
the maid of
He is
honor,
lying about the election. He
Angelica
can't delay it. It's a state
Schuyler.
thing. To the groom,
To the groom, to the groom, to the groom,
to the bride,
to the bride.
from your sister,
Angelica,
who is always by your side. I haven't read this one at all. To your union,
revolution.
and the hope that you provide. May you always be satisfied. I remember that night, I just might forget that night for the rest of my days. I remember those soldier boys tripping over themselves to win our praise. I remember that dream like candlelight, like a dream that you can't quite place. But Alexander, I'll never forget I really don't.
I saw you
I can't sing that one.
I have never been the same. Intelligent
excited eyes in a hunger pain frame. And when you said hi, I forgot my dang name. Set my heart aflame, every part aflame. This is not a game.
Strike me
As a woman who has never been satisfied, I'm sure I don't know what you mean. You forget yourself.
You're
Like me, I'm never satisfied. Is that right? I've never been satisfied. My name is Alex Schuyler, Alexander Hamilton. Where's your family from? Unimportant, there's a million things I haven't done. Just you wait, just you wait. But this is what it feels like to match with someone at your level. What the hell is this catch? Feeling like the freedom of seeing the light. Key in a kite, you see it, right? Conversation lasts 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Everything we said in total agreement. 3 minutes, a bit of a dance, a bit of a posture, a bit of a stance. He's a bit of a flirt, but I'm gonna give it a chance. I asked about his family, did you see his answer? His hand started fidgeting, he looked askance. This is flying by the seat of his pants. Handsome, boy does he know it. Peach fuzz, he can't even grow it. I want to take him far away from this place. Then I turn and see my sister's face, and she is hopeless. No, she is helpless. Her eyes are just helpless. And I realize 3 fundamental truths at the exact same time.
Where are you taking me?
I'm about to change your life.
Then by all means,
Lead the way.
Number 1.
I'm a girl in a world in which my only job is to marry rich. My father has no son, so I'm the one who has to social climb for one. So I'm the oldest
And the wittiest and the gossip in New York City. Insidious. Alexander is penniless. Not to make no one any less.
Elizabeth Schuyler.
Tyler,
It's a pleasure to
me
meet you.
too.
Skylar.
My
My sister.
Number 2.
He's after me, cause I'm a Schuyler sister that elevates the status side. Have to
Be naive to set that aside. Maybe that is why I introduced him to Eliza. Now that's his bride. Nice going and delicate. He was right. You will never be satisfied.
Thank you for all your service.
If it takes fighting a war for us to
meet, it will have been worth it.
I'll leave you to it.
Number 3.
I know my sister like I know my own mind. You will never find anyone as trusting or as kind. If I tell her that I love him, she'd be silently resigned. He'd be right. She'd say I'm fine. She'd be lying. But when I fantasize at night, it's Alexander's eyes as I romanticize what might have been if I hadn't sized him up so quickly. At least, my dear Eliza's his wife. At least I keep his eyes in my life. To the groom, to the bride, from the sister who is always by your side. To you, and the hope that you provide. Be satisfied. She'll be happy as his bride, and I know he will never be satisfied. I will never be satisfied. Could you know what, that one, if I actually rehearse it even one time, could have some merit, but without any rehearsal at all, it is way too hard. But thank you for staying with me for that performance. I enjoyed it.
When it comes to fighting germs and viruses, here are some key tips to remember. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Wash your hands often, and for
Musicals are more fun than politics right now. But we can reassure ourselves that Trump can't delay the election. He can just talk a lot of shit to distract from the economic news. States conduct the elections and states certify the election results. And there's a lot of Republicans up for election as well. So the country is not yet in the state that Trump can just declare himself the supreme emperor his base is eroding. I worked out why young Republicans are more likely than their older counterparts to be turning on Trump. They are hit harder by job losses. So that wasn't in the Brookings Institute analysis that I read. That's my analysis that I bring to the table. That's why you watch me, bitches, for the extra bits of reflection that I periodically come up with. If you don't remember what I'm talking about, I can link to the article. It was by an analyst working for the prestigious Brookings Institute about how Trump is losing support amongst young white working class. So they are extraordinarily supportive of Trump overall. White working class voters, you can see here. I'll make it larger for you. Yes, I was just covering that, Norma Jean, that Trump's talking about delaying it. It's not up to him. It's state administered and state certified, and that he is just talking shit to pull headlines from the fact that the economy is doing really badly. And all of his gung-ho-ness about reopening the economy was a way to position himself as contrarian in opposition to what Democrats want. People might be realizing that more, that Trump just takes whatever position is opposite to the scientists' advice, really, so that he can pretend to be an original thinker and a disruptor who people should get behind because he says the things nobody else wants to say. And in the current climate of everything working out really, really badly, it becomes evident that taking an oppositional position reflexively to everything, scientists say that we should open schools carefully. No, open schools without care. Just do it. Say that the other people are wrong for resisting that. To always try and push your opponents into a position where you can deride them for being weak. Trump wants to sell more t-shirts that say only Trump has the balls to do what needs to be done. And as outcomes visibly worsen across the United States, and the media begins to collect the data that reflects that, so that people will find it harder to tell themselves, oh yes, well, things are shit where I am, but the big picture is rosy because Trump's such a great manager. That point is undermined now by the collection of data. Trump hasn't yet corrupted enough institutions and enough facilities that report on economic data to be able to give him another term, and he would be able to be like, yes, there is no economic collapse. Everything's great. Nobody's starving to death. We're not North Korea. I've murdered my niece and that's all fine. She deserved to be murdered. Everything's great here. Everybody's happy. Everybody loves me. So America is not fully North Korea yet. You've got probably 30% of the population that are irredeemably Trump supporters and will be very difficult to talk out of that, even as their relatives die around them and lose their jobs. Look at Louis Gohmert, contracted COVID and is trying to find a way to say maybe the mask he once wore for a minute gave him COVID. So yes, the economy has contracted by more than it has since the Great Depression. Yes, I have seen that Herman Cain died. He's 74. I'm hoping it brings it home to more people that the virus isn't a joke. It's not a joke to lose elderly people who would otherwise have on average 10 to 15 years more life. It's not okay to say these are people who would die anyway, which a lot of Republicans seem to imply, that it's an okay sacrifice because they're not losing many productive years. It's a very social Darwinist approach to say if people aren't actively productive, then they're not worthwhile making an effort to keep around. And that attitude, of course, abuses the social contract, which is that people work hard, pay taxes, and then retire in the hope of getting to live their declining years in peace and enjoyment and comfort and have a golden decade or so, being able to love their grandchildren or just love their partner or love pottering in the garden or whatever it is gives them joy without having to participate in the daily grind and supported by the entitlements they have earned during their working lifetimes. But COVID is robbing people of that. And it's not okay to adopt the callousness of typical Republican Party attitudes. Thank you. I always enjoy being congratulated because you might have heard of the syndrome called imposter syndrome. Women apparently suffer from it more than men, which is a feeling that they don't quite deserve to be heard or don't deserve attention or promotions. And I, as an Australian commenting on US politics, can suffer from that in a compounded fashion, being both a woman and an outsider who has never lived in America, voted in America, or studied in an American school, or studied American politics in any formal institution. But I have informally studied it now for 2 years, and I have learned a lot, and I have an interest and a curiosity in learning. Trump is promoting a pizza restaurant immediately following the death of Herman Cain. How does the pizza restaurant relate to Herman Cain? Is it the pizza restaurant that Herman Cain was the CEO of at one point? Bizarre. So yes, I am not, I try to resist the invitation to focus on Trump supporters. I want to talk about them a bit because their existence and the gleefulness with which they celebrate bullying the rest of America is not okay to me. And I always want to ask the rest of America not to settle, not to passively accept that abusive relationship, that a mistake in the Constitution, a pacifying mechanism offered to get the buy-in or the acquiescence of Southern slave states to say, hey, you states that are worried that because you are largely agricultural and derive your prosperity from the unpaid labor of slaves, the highly lucrative unpaid labor of slaves, you're worried you might lack political power and therefore might get shafted in a system in which people can vote democratically for a leader. So we'll put in this provision of the Electoral College in which we count the bodies of slaves towards a population tally without actually giving slaves any part of a vote. Slaves, 3 out of every 5 slaves were counted. Doesn't mean they were given 3/5 of the rights of a normal person. They were given none of the rights of a standard American citizen, but 3 out of every 5 slaves counted towards a population tally that was then used to calculate the electors in an electoral college system. It scares you that Trump's approval isn't 0%, but you should know, and everybody should know, that 30% of Americans are very detached from reality, and that there are too many systems in America that have been allowed to flourish for a long time that don't have, that operate outside of the fairness doctrine, because once the fairness doctrine was disestablished, it was even more difficult to hold liars to account, high-profile liars in the media. So political speech is protected, but it became also protected to be Alex Jones or Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson, and to lie to people about who's benefiting from government services and who is paying for them. And you can see a lot of people have very much absorbed the lies that southern states are productive, red states are productive, and that blue states are drains on the federal coffers, which is the opposite of the truth. Federal states are more likely to over-contribute to federal coffers, and red states are more likely to be drains, net drains on federal coffers, and to require significantly more in federal aid than they pay in federal taxes. So that's why 30% of the United States is rationally a write-off, but in a functional democracy, they should not have significant political power. But in a dysfunctional democracy, which America currently is, they are killing their votes are creating outcomes that result in the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, as well as the suffering of hundreds of thousands of Americans. Damaged lung capacity, damaged kidney functioning and heart functioning, etc. Yes, I've talked about how Florida is essentially enforcing a poll tax, and that the Supreme Court upheld that poll tax, but that LeBron James has started an organization to pay those fines. So if that is very motivating to you, that's an organization you can donate to help pay those small fines, which would otherwise be used to disenfranchise voters with small criminal records, which are disproportionately Black Americans, so disproportionately often Democratic voters. Yes, the Voting Rights Act needs to be upheld again. Conservative appointed Supreme Court judges have weakened the Voting Rights Act. We could argue whether it's conscious or unconscious, but they've contributed significantly to the disenfranchisement of Black voters in America through the pretense that racism was over. Racism isn't over. Racism is still motivating a lot of Republicans who trade off public acceptance of racism to seek advantage for themselves. So I'm going to make this larger again so we can see it. This is Trump, who is losing support amongst the white working class voters. What does he have as the lowest? Let's see. The first table, it might be hard for you to read, is 18 to 35 years. This is the middle-aged people, 40 to 64, and then 65 plus. So this group is the most supportive, this middle-aged group. Elderly people would normally be even more conservative. They have what's called survivor bias. It's sort of like prosperity gospel, but a little bit different. Instead of saying, I am wealthy and I deserve it, therefore I must be inherently virtuous and poor people must be inherently lacking in virtue. Instead, you say, I have survived for this long, I must be inherently virtuous, and people who died must have been inherently lacking in virtue in some way. So it's just a bias that shapes how you interpret the world, and it means you say, don't help other people because I got where I got through my own virtues. It's not the most charitable of biases, but there you go, it exists. And it doesn't impact all elderly people, obviously, but it's just statistically speaking more likely to infect the thinking of people who are older, that they congratulate themselves on surviving for so long and may have a predisposition towards wanting the government not to help other people, because people tend to discount the help that they've received and highlight their own contribution. You probably see that in work colleagues. I'm the greatest. I did all the stuff. People who earn money and don't want to pay tax because they say, I owe nothing to society. Everything I have achieved is by the virtue of my own efforts. But the striking situation here I want to highlight is young people who have fallen in their support for Trump. What's the thing? They think most poorly of him in handling race relations and bringing the country together. What about economic policy? 57%. So that's going to go down as people realize that Trump's ongoing failure to respond effectively to the virus is sabotaging the economy as well. That the economy and a pandemic response are inseparable. All right. So I saw a doctor today share what needs to be done. And before I go, I'm going to share it with you because I want you to take that away, to have that be something that you can insist on. To say, hey, Trump, this is what's needed. All right, so here is Dr. Eric Ding. This is his account. He's an epidemiologist and health economist, 16 years public health at Harvard, FAS Task Force Steering Committee. What's FAS? Let's have a look. Something. Okay, so he is saying what we need now: testing, fast, cheap, and at home, contact tracing, mask mandate, premium masks, mass-produced, indoor air ventilation and air disinfection. Oh, like letting in as much air as you can indoors. Fight health misinformation. Hey, that's an important point. I rarely see that. And it really needs to happen. People need to be able to come up with memes to combat commonly circulated disinformation points. Doctors making memes about how you don't get carbon dioxide poisoning if you wear a mask. Yes, doctors do it. Yes, it seems intuitive to appreciate that, but people love sharing assertive bits of information around. And the people who are often putting very focused energy into sharing memes around are disinformation agents, because America is at war with Russia. Russia started it. They're conducting a hybrid war against the United States. And there's a lot of embedded Benedict Arnolds in the United States, in the Republican Party, and then a lot of unwitting patsies who go along with it in the Republican and MAGA voting population. CDC and FDA independence from White House. Yes, that would be great. That's key. Unlikely to happen, but we can still push for it. And precision target hotspot lockdowns. All very sensible things, and not to be sniffed at, because we have power. The right has often been able to dominate media narratives because they have pushed forward with outrage, confected outrage, with a lot of conviction, because they've been pursuing power. There's a famous quote: those who do not want war must learn to organize for peace. We must learn to organize for health protectiveness. It's not enough to rely on just congratulating ourselves for being right as the world continues to collapse around us. We can't sink into cynicism or despair. We need to still be active and loud in articulating what is needed, what is necessary, and what will help. And that information is out there. We just have to pursue Mr. Rogers' dictate of look for the helpers. There are helpers, and we have to share their helpful message, because awareness is a starting point of building political will. And there's lots of ways in which we can contribute to building political will to do the right things, to do the necessary and helpful things, rather than just sit on our butts bewailing the absence of leadership. Yes, it's a terrible effing ongoing tragedy that there is such a failure of leadership, and that the response has been such a write-off at the federal level. We, who can still breathe, who still have breath in our bodies, must use that breath and use those typing fingers and use those letter-writing hands to demand testing, contact tracing, mask mandates, separation of CDC and FDA from the White House, precision target hotspot lockdowns. If you know your state has a hotspot area, make a noise that the governor needs to lock down. If you see disinformation, make a note of it, screenshot the tweet and send it to a doctor to ask online, like an activist doctor online, to ask if it's possible for them to give you a phrase that you can shape into a meme asserting the truth. Because this is an information war, and we are foot soldiers in that war. Sometimes I think to myself, what am I doing? Just am I pursuing notoriety for myself? But I'm not. My husband knows that he's the one supporting our family, and that his wife is doing benevolently minded activist work. We have to do more than vote the scandals out, because these next 98 days are still critical in a sense of exponential disease spread is still occurring. And each of these days is still critical. And we can't just abandon ourselves to a position where Trump kills people with impunity whilst awaiting an electoral loss. So the action is not the only thing requiring our action. We have to do this. I'll make it bigger so you can see. And I've retweeted it already, so it's in my headline. Please make note of these steps, because you are all voices that can call for these steps. Even Canadians, everybody who has a voice on Twitter. Twitter is not the real world, but Twitter is a place where ideas gain traction. So we contribute to that traction, and our comments and our insistence and our voice and our outrage. Not so much our sarcasm and our contempt, but those also still have a role to play as assertive statements of position. But we can do a lot to say, hey, scoundrels, this is what needs to be fixed. This is what needs to be done. We can create more unity because, yes, the terrible people who ignore mask wearing and circulate disinformation, they are outliers, but they have a type of power that we can still work to counteract. We are more numerous than them, but we must make sure that we don't suffer from that kind of group passivity where we say, well, there's a lot of us, but do we have a leader? What should we be doing? Let's just watch from the sidelines and say they are messing it up. They are messing it up. We can still make noises about what they need to do to fix this, what needs to be done to turn the situation around. All democracies are fragile, and that's why Holocaust survivors often say that we have to be vigilant, because they understand that the darkness in the human heart is easily roused to fervor, to blind, hateful fervor, particularly if an unprincipled and opportunistic person seeks a rise to power. Because hatred is an old pathway to power, and history and studying history has often given people a strong resolve to oppose scoundrels exploiting human darkness to rise to power. Germany has outlawed using the swastika because they understand how easily you can use symbols like the MAGA hat and how easily you can abuse the flag to stir the darkest forces in human nature. How you can manipulate people's threat perception to work them into a frenzy against an enemy. How you can make them feel united and happy and gleeful and powerful. How you can unite them in a shared delusion of an omnipotence. And it's a delusion, but only to a certain extent, because they do have power. They do have undeserved power. They are a minority that has triumphed against expectation and against legitimacy to have Donald Trump installed as president, to have him have that power, even that passive power to do nothing, the incredibly consequential power of failing to act against COVID. That's a good phrase for me to write down. It is an incredibly consequential power that Trump has to do nothing, to forsake having a federal plan, to forsake the opportunity to create a national testing scheme, to forsake the opportunity to enact the Defense Production Act for the benefit of the American people and compel production of high-quality masks. So that's all from me, unless we do, maybe we'll do one more song. It's a little indulgent of me, isn't it? But what else can I do at this point? I don't have a big enough voice. I'd love to have a national voice to tell Americans to pay attention to the economy, to compel Americans to ask for a national plan. I've been just saying it for months over and over again, that we have to try and raise our voices to ask the media to keep asking Trump about a national plan, that we can't just accept his lack of action. But Alan says you'll get there. That's nice. In the interim, I'm going to keep singing. It's a spirit-raising exercise. I'm thinking I should be writing educational songs as well. Oh, no, that's the ad.
Ah, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Burr, sir.
Did you hear the news about good old
General Mercer. No,
You know,
the Clement Street. Yeah.
they renamed
Named after him. The Mercer legacy is secure. Sure. And all he had to do was die. That's a lot less work. We ought to give it a try.
Now, how you
Gonna get your debt plan through. I guess I'm gonna finally have to listen to you, Billy. Talk less. Smile more. Do whatever it takes to get my plan on the Congress floor. Madison and Jefferson are merciless. Hate the sin, love the sinner. Sorry, I've got to go. Decisions are happening over dinner. Two Virginians and an immigrant walk into a room diametrically opposed foes. Merge with a compromise, having opened doors that were previously closed. Bros. Merges with unprecedented financial power, system he can shape however he wants. The Virginians emerged with the nation's capital, and here's the pièce de résistance. No one else was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened. No one else was in the room where it happened, where it happened, the room where it happened. Nobody knows how the game is played, the art of the trade, how the sausage gets made. We just assume that it happened, but no one else was in the room where it happened. Thomas and Clay, Alexander was on Washington's doorstep one day in distress and disarray. Alexander said, I've nowhere else to turn, basically begged me to join the fray. I approached Madison and said, I know you hate him, but let's hear what he has to say. Well, I arranged the meeting, I arranged the menu, the venue, the seating. No one else was in the room where it happened, where it happened, the room where it happened. No one else was in the room where it happened, where it happened, the room where it happened. No one really knows how the parties get to yes. The pieces at a sacrifice to every game of chess. We just assume that it happens, but no one else is in the room where it happens. Meanwhile, Madison is grappling with the fact that not every issue can be settled by committee. Congress is fighting over where to put the Capitol. It isn't pretty. And approaches with a dinner and invite. Madison responds with Virginian insight. And solve one problem with another and win a victory for the Southerners. In other words, quid pro quo. Work a little closer to home.
Actually, I would.
Well, I propose the Potomac. Provide his votes. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Let's go. No.
What else
Was in the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened. No one else was in the room where it happened, where it happened, the room where it happened. God, in God we trust, but we'll never really know what got discussed. We just assumed that it happened, and no one else was in the room where it happened.
Alexander Hamilton.
Did they say to you to get you to sell New York City down the river?
Alexander Hamilton.
What did you know about the dinner? Was there presidential pressure to deliver?
Alexander Hamilton.
Did you know even then it doesn't matter where you put the U.S. Capitol? Folks, we're in the same spot. More than you gave, and I wanted what I got. When you got skin in the game, you stay in the game. But you don't get a win unless you play in the game. You get love for it. You get hate for it. You get nothing if you wait for it, wait for it, wait. God help and forgive me. I want to build something that's gonna outlive me.
What do you
Want, Bird? What do you want, Bird? If you stand for nothing, Bird, what do you fall for? The room where it happens, the room where it happens. I wanna be in the room where it happens, room where it happens. I wanna be in the room where it happens. I've got to be in that room, in that big old room. Promise, hold your nose and close your eyes. Leaders to save the day. We don't get a say in what they trade away. We dream of a brand new start, but we dream in the dark for the most part. Dark as a tomb where it happens. To be in the room. I've got to be in the room. I've got to be in the room. I gotta be in a big old room. In the room. Click, boom. Yay. Thank you, sir. Much obliged. What about...
The Battle of
Town.
Yorktown.
1781.
Monsieur Hamilton.
Monsieur Lafayette, and where you belong. Oh, you say no sweat. We're finally on the field. We've had pride of run. Immigrants, we get the job done.
So what happens if we
Win. I go back to France. I bring freedom to my people if I'm given the chance.
We'll be with you
When you do, go lead your men. I'll see you on the other side till we meet again. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Ayo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Turns upside down. The world turns upside down. Oh, upside down. Imagine death so much it feels more like a memory. This is where it gets me. On my feet, the enemy ahead of me. This is the end of me. At least I have a friend with me. Weapon in a hand, command, and my men with me. Now remember, my Eliza's expecting me. And that my Eliza's expecting. We gotta go, gotta get the job done. Gotta start a new nation, gotta meet my son. Take the bullets out your gun, the bullets out your gun. We move undercover and we move as one. Through the night we have one shot to live another day. We cannot let a stray gunshot give us away. Who sees the moment and stay in it? It's either that or meet the business end of a bayonet. The code word is Rochambeau, dig me? You have your orders now, go man, go. So the American experiment begins with my friends all scattered to the winds. Lawrence is in South Carolina, redefining bravery. We'll never be free until we end slavery. Finally drive the British away. Lafayette is there waiting in Chesapeake Bay. How did we know that this plan would work? We had a spy on the inside, that's right. Hercules Mulligan, a tail spying on the British government. Taking measurements, information, and then I smuggle it to my brother's revolutionary covenant. I'm running with the Sons of Liberty and I am loving it. What happens when you up against the ruffians? We in a shit house, somebody's gotta shovel it. Hercules Mulligan, I need no introduction. When you knock me down, get the fuck back up again.
After a
Week of fighting, a young man in a red coat stands on a parapet. We lower our guns as he frantically waves a white handkerchief. And just like that, it's over. We tend to our wounded, we count our dead. White soldiers wonder alike. This really means freedom. Not yet.
we negotiate
The terms of surrender. I see George Washington smile. We escort their men out of Yorktown. They stagger home single file. Tens of thousands of people flood the streets. There are screams and church bells ringing. And as our fallen foes retreat, I hear the drinking song they're singing. The world turned upside down. The world turned upside down. The world turned upside down. The world turned upside down, down. France.
Gotta start a new nation, gotta meet my son.
We've won. We've won.
We won.
Earth turned upside down. Do you know the amount of dead people in the United States as a consequence of people like this chap here with his racist little All Lives Matter slogan, which isn't necessary. All Lives Matter is an accepted part of modern society, but to say it, to flout the Black Lives Matter slogan, is to deny the reality of disproportionate police violence against people of color, against Black men and Black women in the United States. So that stubborn, obdurate, racist embrace of deceptions and untruths is what has brought America to the precipice of its own downfall. Because putting a white supremacist in power is the achievement that they're so gleeful about, saying Hamilton must be destroyed, the liberals are posting cringe. They're so proud of themselves for their contempt and their disdain. And I'm sure it makes them feel just great about themselves. And a lot of people do it. People on the left as well spend an inordinate amount of time being contemptuous towards others on social media. But we will strengthen the power of love and compassion because the absence of love and compassion have wrought such havoc, have given the nihilists so much power, have given the corrupt self-dealers so much power. It's such a great cover story to say, I'm going to persecute Mexicans for you. I'm going to build this incredibly impressive wall to preserve you and wall off your privilege from attack from brown-skinned people. A wall that falls over in strong wind. A wall that is the contracts for which are given to friends of Trump, to donor friends, part of a corrupt, grifting, self-serving circle jerk. So the people who come here and try to laugh at me from my heart are deadly in their self-serving circle jerk. But Alan is proud to be one of my Patreons, and I'm glad. I'm glad that you're proud of that. And I'm grateful to John as well, who was appreciative. And Paul, thank you for the roses and the gestures. At least white supremacists haven't ruined this just yet. So that's exciting. I did enjoy singing their songs. It was fun. We've had a few musical interludes today. I would normally be a little recalcitrant to perform in front of my husband, who's in the next room. But I think I've explained to him now that I'm getting some positive feedback. He knows I'm not the best singer in the whole world, and that I could do with some more practice of these songs before I perform them in public as well. But I think he also understands that I'm getting some positive reinforcement, and I'm definitely getting a renewed zest for life out of performing Hamilton songs. American exceptionalism, the pursuit of excellence, is rubbing off on me a little bit. It's empowering in and of itself. And I've always been someone who's very vividly understood the downsides of proclaiming exceptionalism. I'm Jewish, and Jewish people often are known for saying that we are the chosen people. It's supposed to be a responsibility rather than an assertion of privilege. It's supposed to be a calling to make an extra effort to be ethical and principled. But at the same time, it's associated historically a little bit with a habit of being persecuted by other countries and by various monarchies and ruling classes. But Hamilton, the musical, makes me feel happy to embrace the idea of American pursuit of excellence and American exceptionalism. So yes, how much is it dropped? The economy has dropped 32.9% in the worst gross domestic product report ever. So that's an article put out by NPR. Rick Wilson, the former Republican operative who's now a never Trumper and works hard to oust Trump and to oust Republican senators who enable Trump and continue to enable Trump, and his devastating leadership of the United States. Rick asks people to get your absentee ballot, do it today. Vote the moment you can. This has to be an electoral college wipeout, and it has to hurt. He has to be crushed, humiliated, and driven from office, public life, and society. I like the forcefulness of that. I like the spaces between each sentence. Good for Rick. Yes, Herman Cain is dead. He's on in 5 minutes. Who's on? Trump? Oh, Rick Wilson, maybe. Yes. That's why the Tulsa rally is probably trending on Twitter. Yes, Rick Wilson is quick-witted. He abused his intellect by using it in service of Republicans, but I've learned to accept that 70% of people's voting affiliations and voting behavior is to do with their social context, with their family and their family's loyalties. So it's almost hereditary. And people in a familial context will find familial rationalizations. They'll look at Republicans and they'll say, yep, Republicans are associated with this and this type of virtue. And yes, there is often delusional beliefs, and they've become particularly pronounced delusional beliefs over the last 5 years. But there's been a degree of delusion there for a long time. People still pretending that Ronald Reagan was not racist. Ronald Reagan was very racist. Richard Nixon was very racist and very exploitative. So it is what it is. Who's on in 5 minutes? Pete? Which Pete? Pete Buttigieg? Which Pete? Let's see. We can have a look at trends. I'm excited that the Tulsa rally is trending. So yes, Herman Cain's last public appearance was appearing at Trump's Tulsa rally without a mask. He posted an anti-mask tweet the day before that has since been deleted. There he is. There's Herman McCain. And look at him. He looks like a man who could have readily enjoyed 15 to 20, 30 more years of existence had he not disparaged mask wearing and attended a potential super spreader event with 6,000 people shouting for Trump. And I think a lot of Black Americans, they're approximately 8% of registered Black American voters support Trump. And I've seen accounts from some of them who were clearly very strongly motivated by an attachment to anti-choice efforts. I'm not calling it pro-life right now because that movement and those political affiliations are so associated with death. I'd rather call them pro-death at the moment. That's just my current mood. But this anti-choice motivation, the idea that it helps babies to legally deny women options. It's interesting because the greatest falls in the abortion rate are associated with Democratic leadership and Democratic policies. People who support, who give big government support to Planned Parenthood, places that help with the distribution of contraception and cheap contraception, people who compel employers to include in health insurance plans access to contraception for women. Those are the measures that are associated with much lower abortion rates. The abortion rate in Colorado was cut by 40% when some private donors made it possible for a government plan to offer free long-term contraceptive measures to women of low income. And 40%, 40% cut. But pro-life people don't hear that so much because the pro-choice movement has often stuck to just asserting my body, my choice. Such an inadequate and ineffective assertion. It's appealing to liberals because they're trying to say we assert women's autonomy, we support women's autonomy. But you can see how open to abuse that argument is by the fact that it's been repurposed as an anti-mask argument. I'm not going to bother deriding the hypocrisy of the pro-death people who say, I'm not going to wear a mask, my body, my choice. But I'm going to use it to criticize feminists who should have picked a better slogan. Yes, female autonomy is so important that the United Nations calls deprivation of opportunity to have an abortion as a type of emotional torture. I said that inadvertently. We will do all we take all the help we can get to rid the world of the cancer that is our president. So you think my husband is on in 5 minutes? He's not. He's not going to talk to you. My husband doesn't go on broadcasts. Honey, I know you're not going to be interviewed, but if you did have anything to say to the people, what would you say? All right. She's busy working. No, that's not going to happen. No, but there are people who've offered to do a duet with me. I'm just waiting for them to contact me now. And so I better do it while I think of it. I'll contact Richard because he said we should do a duet. Oops, I tried to type duet and it autocorrected to dust. I was just going to send in the word dust, which sounds rude. But now I've written to Richard Dennison and said duet. That would be exciting. I would love to do a duet. Covers up some of the holes in my in my singing. Please don't let them change the narrative today. The very same people who said not to wear masks and that the Tulsa rally would be safe and that you should trust Trump are the same people telling you to send your kids back to school today. It's today. Yeah, I hope this really sinks in. Why is President Clinton trending? Because President Clinton is speaking at John Lewis's funeral. And John Lewis wrote a posthumous op-ed in the New York Times and asked for it to be published on the day he died. So he left everybody his marching orders. So President Obama, President Bush, and President Clinton are all speaking at John Lewis's funeral service. Well, that is pretty important. He made plenty of good trouble, but he had an uncanny ability to heal troubled waters. Well, that's lovely. I'll read one more quote and then I say goodbye and let you go and watch it live. We live in a better and nobler country today because of John Lewis and his abiding faith in the power of God, in the power of democracy, and in the power of love to lift us all to a higher ground. That's nice. I still see President Bush as somewhat of a war criminal who had a determination not to listen to evidence and to push forward with a war against Iraq, despite Iraq's non-involvement in the 9/11 attacks. And indeed, so many, hundreds of thousands of dead Iraqi civilians. It's a number that's hard to comprehend, but perhaps now as we contend with over 100,000 dead United States residents, we could come to grips with that number and say President Bush probably did know that Saudi Arabian government was more involved in 9/11 than the Iraqi leader was, but Bush wanted to intimidate any nation with a government that was hostile to the United States, to have a show of force, to say we are a very powerful nation. Do not even think about attacking us in the future. So yes, the rationalization contained a lie that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He did not, but that lie was used to create a critical mass of support for a war that was not, strictly speaking, justifiable or necessary. But yes, I did promise to let everybody go and watch the funeral unimpeded. So thank you so much for your time and attention today, as always. And I hope you've enjoyed the broadcast. If you do enjoy my broadcast, please consider recommending them to a friend. Please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, which is DavCat43, which is an easy place to go back and watch older broadcasts if you so choose, and is an easier proposition for me to monetize once I gain 9,900 more followers. How many followers do I need before it gets monetized? 1,000, 10,000, maybe 1,000. I haven't kept careful track of that, but I do think I need to work on providing a service. So yes, thank you, Ardmore John, much appreciated. Thank you, Alan. Thank you for being Patreons, to my Patreons, and my Patreon account, should anybody else wish. Actually, I can't post it now. There's a funeral on. Thanks, Alan. So appreciate your support. Take care, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll probably see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.